we could we just step back for a second? If you think God is Jesus, right?
Hmm.
What exactly was the point of the sacrifice? Because to accept that God is Jesus, right, you would have to
Yeah.
accept that God preordained a blood sacrifice to himself to change his own mind about a punishment he already made for us himself.
Ooh, this is good. This is very good because I'm telling you what, you
It's
tell
a
this
fair
person.
question, though, right?
No, it is, but I have an answer for you. All
Okay.
right. And everyone knows that follows me that this is going to be a good answer. All right.
Okay.
First off, the promised seed of Abraham was given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and it was through Jesus that the covenant would come. The new covenant. All right. The old covenant, on the other hand, which is the law, the Mosaic law, the added sins unto transgression, was given at Mount Sinai. Okay? At Mount Sinai, what ended up happening, these people, the Jews, they chose that covenant of the law because they weren't ready for Christ. And in this covenant, it wasn't Christ that came to them. It wasn't God that came to them. They chose their own well-doing. They chose good and evil because God even gave them a choice. But what ended up happening is, according to Exodus chapter 18 to 20, they were told to come up to Mount Horeb with Moses. Mount Horeb is the mountain of light. Well, guess what? They didn't want it. They said, Moses, you go up the mountain by yourself. And in this, he went up to Mount Sinai by himself. Yahweh came down in thick clouds of darkness, whereas the Bible tells us our God does not dwell in thick clouds of darkness. He dwells in unapproachable light. So when the Jews received the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, the Old Law, it was because they weren't ready for Christ, and it was a covenant that was made up of works. A covenant that was made up of blood and animal sacrifice, because that's the only way they could get forgiven of sin. Because there were blessings and curses, and when you sinned, you were under a curse, and that curse would automatically send you to the grave. All right? When Yahweh, who was in the thick clouds of darkness, came down, that wasn't the true God. That wasn't Jesus' Father. That was the angel that came down in thick clouds. That was an angel that people chose because they chose Judaism, angel worship, because they weren't ready for Christ. So what ends up happening when Jesus comes along and he says that I am the bread of life. I am that which is good. There is none that is good but me. And the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Jesus was not a sacrifice to his own Father. Jesus was not a sacrifice to his own Father. Jesus was a sacrifice to the bloodthirsty God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, because he wanted animal sacrifice. Jesus said, I desire obedience and not sacrifice. But in order to free the Jews, which he came to, which was the lost sheep of the house of Israel, from the law, which was the requirement of animal sacrifice, Jesus came as a human sacrifice because that was the only thing that would free those Jews from the law. So when Jesus freed them from the law as the human sacrifice, as the ransom that died on Calvary's cross, as the sacrifice to Yahweh, they could now be freed from the law. And now that they were freed from the law, they could now come back to the promised seed of Abraham, which was the blessings of God and not the curses, which is why the resurrection can happen now, because there's no curse.
Well, is Jesus and Yahweh not the same thing?
No,
So Jesus and God are not the same.
no, that's not what I'm saying. Jesus is the Father. He is the unapproachable light. He is the Most High.
So who is Yahweh?
Flesh. Huh?
Sorry, I think
Yahweh was Yahweh was a different God. Yahweh was a son of El Elyon, the Most High.
Okay. So you're saying that Yahweh is not the same God as Jesus, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So sorry, this is just a different perspective than what I normally get. Normally, Yahweh or Jesus are the same, right?
Absolutely. Of course.
Okay. Okay. Well, this has actually been an interesting conversation, man. Unfortunately, I have to go, which really sucks because I've enjoyed talking to you. But I will definitely catch you back on again. Is this something you do through the week or?
Yeah, man, we can talk anytime. If these are some of the things that's throwing you off as it is, if you really think about it, like as an atheist, you're like, oh God, I don't want to worship a God that does all this animal sacrifice, all this human Jesus was a human sacrifice. I can get your reasoning. But when you start to look at it from a different mindset, that Jesus wasn't a sacrifice to the Father, he was a sacrifice to this bloodthirsty God, it all starts to really make sense. It all starts to come into perspective. All right?
Okay, man. All right. Well, again, thank you for the civil conversation. I really appreciate it, man.